As Biggie Smalls once said, it was all a dream. But now it looks like reality. The Jaguars look like they're going to the playoffs. We'll talk about how it started, how it went, and how it's ending up. And we'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars. You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Happening, good people. Welcome to another edition of Locked On Jaguars. I am your host, Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars Daily Podcast, where it's your team every day, and we thank you for making us your first listen. Also, reminding you that we are free on all platforms. Make sure you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, like wherever you're listening to now, wherever you're watching now. That's where you always be able to get it for free. On YouTube, hit that like button for me too. I never tell you guys to do that, but I want you to hit that like button. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On. Make sure you spell that in all caps. That's the promo code Locked On. All right, man. I started off with a little Biggie Smalls reference, a notorious B.I.G. reference, that it was all a dream. And now it appears that it is all about to become a reality, and the Jaguars will make the playoffs. And I'm not putting put the cart before the wheels or put the eggs before they hatch, whatever that is. That's not what I'm doing. The Jaguars will be favorites in both of the next two games they play, against Houston as well as against Tennessee. The Tennessee game particularly is one that longtime Jaguar fans are going to take a little bit of there'll be some Conor McGregor strutting and some Vince McMahon pimping and some Ric Flair walking into that stadium on that Sunday in particular, because of back in the day, 15-3, all three losses coming to the Titans. AFC Championship game lost here at home to the Titans. Jaguar fans are petty in a good way, and they are going to use every single moment they can to attack that demon that has haunted this franchise for over 20 years now. So the thing that I want to focus on in segment one is back in training camp, it was like most people, it was an afterthought that the Jaguars were going to be able to do this. So how did it start? What happened in the middle? We'll talk about in segment two. I got to get my thoughts together. In segment two, we'll discuss what happened. What were the things that occurred that I believe were the catalyst to changing the outlook of this season? And then how can it finish? What are the possibilities and the probabilities of what this means this year and long-term as we get into the offseason? I'll talk about what it might mean in free agency and the approach and the thought that people have about this franchise as a whole. But first, how did it start? In training camp, it was just a different feeling with Doug Pederson, knowing that you had a coach who had won a Super Bowl. And I know folks like to equate the Tom Coughlin return here, but when Tom Coughlin came back, he wasn't a coach. One of the biggest problems with that was he kind of acted like one, but he really wasn't the coach. And I used to think that it usurped a little bit of the authority that Doug had going on in the locker room. There was just an air of confidence with Doug Pederson. There was a feeling when you're around him that he was organized, that he knew exactly what it takes to win, that he knew that he had to get Trevor Lawrence. And I remember saying this on the podcast. I thought they really did a good job of insulating Trevor Lawrence with a lot of people around him. You had a former head coach who's his quarterback's coach, another former head coach or offensive coordinator who was on the staff, and Jim Bob Cooter, and of course Press Taylor. And some people thought it might have been overkill. Like, well, Doug's the play caller. Well, what is Press going to do? No, if you recall some of our conversations from the past, it was always, to me, that's what they needed. They need more and more people like that in the organization to be able to do the things that a winning team needs to do. So you noticed it from the very beginning. Then you noticed it when you saw Trevor throwing the ball and you saw the confidence that he had. And he's always had talent. When he was a rookie, I once said that you look out and he looks like Secretariat. Like he looked different from the regular guys out there, as I was equating him to being a thoroughbred. But it was something different this year. There was more work. There was less awing or oohing and awing over his talent as much as this year it was. You saw them working on the mechanics. You saw them working on the things that needed to be done. You saw the coaching in training camp. So the ball popped out of his hand a little bit differently. He looked bigger. He looked stronger. The routes that they were running, it wasn't the urban, let's just depend on speed, spread everybody out, go sideways. It was challenging the middle of the field, challenging parts of the field that you didn't see in the past that were challenged. And I said in the first preseason game, they're going to throw the ball into the deep middle of the field. They're going to act like they have a quarterback who has a big arm. You saw the speed of Travis Etienne. You saw a guy like Brandon Sheriff, who's a former All-Pro, who looked like he just added more stability to the offensive line. You saw a defense that was bigger and more physical and athletic than they had been since 2017. So right away, we knew things were going to be okay. And then as the team came out this year, tough game to open the season up in Washington. Came back and won two more. One, which was out west against the Chargers, who are now a playoff team. And then they hit a little bit of a wall. That's the beginning. So now we'll get to the middle. What happened? What turned this team? What made this team start doing the things and going through the adversity that eventually led to them actually becoming a good football team? You know, there's this old saying that, losses, L's aren't really losses, and L's don't stand for losing, that L's can also stand for learning. So that maybe these were learning opportunities. And I firmly believe that, because that's exactly what happened to the Jacksonville Jaguars this year. Those L's weren't losses. They were losses in a win-loss column, but they were more or less learning experiences. And I'll tell you why I feel that way in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. This show is sponsored and brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. I am really geeked out by our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game, Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? I know y'all have, because y'all get on me, like I say all the time. And I'm going to hit a little bit of that in segment 3 when I tell you what I think the Jags should do, and I know y'all going to disagree with it. But you don't have to take all of that out on me, man. Your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, and all the ups and downs of a season. And you can play this game offline. So if you're in airplane mode while you're traveling on a flight, you can go through 2 seasons by the time you take off and land at your destination. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline, as I just said. Play on the go as you want, when you want to. Locked On Jaguars listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On. Make sure you put it in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps, so make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com, Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. And start your podcasting with me today here on Locked On Jaguars, as you do every single day, making us your first listen. We talk about how it began. Let's talk about what happened in the middle of the season. The Jags went on a slump. The Jags had everyone thinking that Trevor Lawrence may not have been generational. Look back in the archives of my podcast, I think one of them was Trevor's costing the Jaguars games. Trevor is not generational, and I meant right now, right? Sometimes the thumbnail is just to get your attention, but then you have to listen to the podcast and you actually understand every single thing that I mean. But in the middle of the season, there was a slump, and you saw folks got back on the fire balky train. You saw folks, feeling like they had felt in the past. And what happened was it just seemed like it was the same old Jaguars. It seemed like it was the same old losing, that this team was devoid of talent, that this team could not finish, couldn't get out of its own way. But when you looked up, all of these games were decided by one score or less. So it just seemed like they were a team destined to say, we've gotten better, but we still need 4 or 5 more players in order to be competitive. I think at that point, a lot of folks were hoping that what they would end up seeing was the Jaguars get better and improve enough in the offseason that they'd be where they are now at the beginning of next year, which means a team ready to start challenging for the playoffs. That's why I said last week that all of this stuff that's happening now happened early. They turned this thing around, and the way they're playing now, this is the way most people thought that they play after another offseason, adding more players and being able to start fresh in a new season and knowing how to win games and finish games, with Trevor Lawrence improving and Calvin Ridley coming in and them getting a few more pieces, and the guys having a whole offseason in Doug's system. What you're seeing now is, I think, what people expected to see in week 8 of the 2023 season. But boy, did it change. It changed because of the steady mind and the steady way that Doug Pederson led this team. And I'm going to keep hopping on that because he is a mile ahead of where Urban Meyer was or would have been. He is a mile ahead of, I believe, where Byron Leftwich would have been, even though I think Byron Leftwich is getting a little bit of a bad rap, because when they were winning, everything was about Tom Brady, and now that they're losing, you ain't blaming it on Brady, you blame it on Leftwich. But I also will tell you that Nathaniel Hackett was a candidate for this job, and some people have even told me that he disappointed the Jaguars when he chose Denver over Jacksonville. I don't know how true it is, but I'll tell you this, Nathaniel Hackett just got fired already. And Russell Wilson looked like he'd never been able to play football at all. So when we talk about the bullets that were dodged, yeah, we dodged a lot of bullets with those coaches, but it's not even that. I'm looking at the plus, the net plus that this team got with Doug Pederson. He's been more than we thought he was going to be. He's been more than that of which was advertised, and it's just a pleasant surprise. So I made a statement last week that I now believe that because of his leadership and because of the way this is going, you're going to see Doug and Trevor, at least for the next 12 years, as the coach and quarterback combination. And that is going to give you so much continuity, so much, look, this is the way we play. And one of Doug's former players, Jason Kelsey, said, it's Jacksonville, nobody cares. I don't even think he would think that now, because in segment 3, I'm going to also mention to you how I think it's going to impact. I wanted to say that right before the Detroit game is where it turned, but then they went into Detroit and got absolutely hammered. So it couldn't have been that. It couldn't have been the Raiders game. It wasn't the Baltimore game. So which game was it? I tell you, to where things started to change in the minds of everyone was the home game against the Dallas Cowboys a couple of weeks ago. Dallas is a legitimate playoff team, a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and they jumped up 27-10 on Jacksonville early in the third quarter. And let me tell you something. I was sitting there watching the game, and I did not believe the Jaguars were out of the game. More importantly, they didn't believe they were out of the game. I'll discuss that and a little bit more in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars, after I also let you know that today's show and episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find an episode from The League available as a bonus episode on Locked On NFL. Now, The League is narrated by Super Bowl champion and legendary smack talker Richard Crabtree Sherman and sports broadcaster and rising star and one of my favorites in Taylor Rooks. The League is an 8-part docuseries about the most bizarre, inspirational, and unlikely stories connected to America's favorite sport, pro football. You won't want to miss these untold stories spanning from the 1940s through the present. Our bonus episode is called The Way of the Cowboy. I think I have been pronouncing that the we of the cowboy, but it's The Way of the Cowboy. And it is the incredible story of how the 1977 Dallas Cowboys brought in Bruce Lee's protege to teach their defense martial arts, ushering a new approach to the way the league trains athletes. Each story offers equal parts history, entertainment, and social commentary. Head over to Locked On NFL for a bonus episode of The League or catch the full series wherever you get your podcast, available now. Audible, get in the game. You can get the game with me here on Locked On Jaguars by making me your first listen every single day, and we greatly appreciate that because it's your team every day. Also, make your second listen to Peter. I was about to say the Peter Bukowski Show, but it's called Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. And it's where they go around the league. I can tell you right now, one of those big stories had to be Luka. Luka had a triple. He had like 100 points, 77 rebounds, and 39 assists or something like that yesterday. But you get those stories and you get the local experts to be able to comment on those stories, and it's all under 30 minutes. So wherever you get your podcast, make sure you tune in and tap in to the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The Cowboys game changed everything for me because I think it showed you, it didn't make them believers in themselves. It showed you that they believed in themselves. If they did not believe in themselves, they would have lost that game. But they found a way to win that game in front of a raucous crowd, in front of a lot of Cowboy fans too. They traveled here to take that L. And then it was very workmanlike and very businesslike when they went up to play the Jets and won that game 19-3. Because it looked different than any game that they had played. And I said that it was the most professional game that they have played in a long time. They look like the way the New England Patriots beat people. You know, nothing fancy. We're just going to outdo you in every single area and win the game 19-3. Now here we go. We got to go to Houston, and they got to play a game that some people think is meaningless. It is not. It will come down to the AFC South in the last week of the season. But if the Jaguars beat Houston, and even if they lose against the Titans, there's still an outside chance they can make it as the last wild card. But we don't worry about that. All you got to do is win the next two games, and I think they will, and that's why I titled this show today the way I did. I think they will win the next two games definitively. I think they will win the next two games easily, even though it's the NFL and nothing seems easy. I just think you're going to see a precursor to the first playoff game. You're going to see that when they clinch at home against the Titans and then whoever they play in the first round. It'll be the Baltimore, or a team, I believe, from the AFC East. If it's Baltimore or Miami or New England, I think the Jaguars are going to win the first playoff game too. Second playoff game, they'll either have to go to Kansas City or Buffalo. They've gone to Buffalo and won before. The last time they played the Bills last year, they beat them. They played Kansas City tough this year. Who knows what can happen, but it's playoff football. All you got to do is get in the dance to have a chance. So I just rhymed again. I started my show with Biggie, and now I said you got to get in the dance to have a chance. Like one more chance, by Biggie Smalls. And that's all they're going to need. They're going to need one more chance every single week. Now it's a week-to-week tournament, and I think you're going to get the absolute best from this young bunch. And that's where we are. What does it mean for the future and next year? Well, like I said, to me, they're already a half a season ahead. This experience down the stretch and the subsequent playoff game that comes with it. It's going to put something in their football DNA. It's going to put something in their a big pot of gumbo that's going to give them the confidence that they're starting next year, and their goals are going to be a little bit different. They won't be fighting for respectability anymore. They'll be fighting to go to that next level, to the upper room, as they say, and be one of those teams that people expect to win. And that's a whole bunch different than you want to wish, you wishing and hoping, where it changes to expectation. And in the offseason, I think they'll have an easier road of getting free agents to come here because of Trevor Lawrence, because of Doug Pederson. Folks want to be in a winning environment where they have a chance. There's no two people that give you a better chance than a coach who's a proven winner and a leader who all the players respond to, and a super, super talented quarterback who has shown that he ain't never scared and he can lead as well. So I think there'll be a very attractive place in the offseason for free agents if they can figure out a way to get some money under the salary cap and do that responsibly. So, yeah, I think short term, y'all going to have some fun over the next month. Long term, y'all going to have some fun over the next 12 to 15 years. And it's because of the work that was done this year. This might be the most important season of any Jaguar season in the history of this franchise, because this is the one, this is not a flash in the pan. This is the one that actually changes this organization and changes. Look, you remember the man hiking the ball on the side of the Patriot helmets? I remember those Patriots, Steve Grogan and all of those dudes. Andre Tippett, and they were the laughing stock of the league. Now they're like dynasty, one of the biggest dynasties ever. You know why? Because Belichick and Brady changed the narrative of that team. And I think this season, you saw the beginning of what's coming for the Jacksonville Jaguars. What's coming for me is a crossover show tomorrow with the guys at Locked On Texans. You'll see that in its entirety wherever you get your podcast. Until then, you guys do what I always say. Take care of each other, and we'll see you the next time here on Locked On Jaguars.